Hi, welcome to Truth and Reality. I'm Ashley, and I'm so happy you're joining us again today. We have started a new podcast with my friend Melissa and I, and the podcast really is just that, talking about the realities of life and how truth and how God and how our faith infiltrates that and comes around it and encompasses it. So we're glad you're here. We want it to be like sitting down with a group of friends for a cup of coffee or tea or whatever you're drinking. And so, Melissa, thanks for being here. Welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. Yes, I have my tea. What do you have today? Coffee or tea?
I'll be real, it's just water today, but I
I
have the
have to
cute
say,
cup.
I do too. Yeah, I have to stay caffeinated. So here we go. Cheers.
I've already had 2 coffees, so I need to keep it down and take it down a notch. So,
Love it.
so the first time we talked, we really just talked about like what is the need for having truth and reality in these conversations and friendships and places where we can discuss real life issues and real topics and actually get healing and growth and community and comfort. And so today we're going to kind of continue that conversation. And Melissa and I are both going to share about different aspects of our life, of our healing, of our growth, of our journeys. And I guess the first question I'll start, and I'll let Melissa go first in sharing her part in it, is how has bridging truth and reality impacted your life? Where do you see that coming together? Or how has that shaped, your walk and your life and your faith?
Yeah, I think Ashley, for me, the biggest thing of just grasping truth and reality. And I talked last time that we had talked together, just about just being a single parent and embracing the reality of what my life looks like and realizing that I can't believe all of the lies of that this life's going to be hard, that this life is going to be just struggling with all of the hard things in life and embracing the reality of that life is going to be difficult. But what do we do? How do we take those hard circumstances and those moments that don't feel well, and how to embrace the reality of what it is?
Yeah, well, and that's good because like we all have those spaces, places, whether it's relationships or jobs,
Mhm,
financials,
mhm.
kids, spouse, just different places, health concerns where we navigate the reality of this broken world we live in, and
Mhm.
knowing too that we don't have to be owned or defined by those things. And
Yep.
so, like, what are a couple things that you would say have helped you navigate that? Like, how have you taken truth and put it in your life? I know for me, I see a life coach, I've seen a counselor. And so being real with the emotions that I'm feeling and the struggles I'm
Mhm.
walking through, and
Yep.
then having them encourage me on how do I take care of myself? How do I do basic needs of am I being taken care of, physically, emotionally, spiritually? And then how do I show up in trials and take care of my kids or do the jobs? Like that's been really crucial part for me, just learning how to navigate. And then also understanding that truth in God's words aren't outside of what I'm doing. Like God, I can bring God into these situations and he can sit like joy can sit tandem to sorrow. And I think
Yep.
some of those things my counselors have helped me walk through that have been more challenging. In prior, I didn't think that they could sit next to each other. What
Right.
are some things that you've done?
And I think you nailed it right on. And I think you and I have some similar patterns of behavior, is that I think you have to identify first that you're not going to do it all right. And so knowing in those moments of what the truth is, like you said, I think taking care of me first and foremost, Ash, as a single mom, of what is important to me, identifying who are the people I can talk to and trust when I'm feeling those moments of vulnerability or feeling overwhelmed, and having those places, whether it's a therapist, whether it's a counselor, right? Having a church to come to be able to lay down those, whatever those disbeliefs are, things that I'm struggling with. I think for me too, and a good outside source for me is working out. I think it places me in a great place mentally to have an outlet, a place that I can let go of all those thoughts. And it enables me to be a better mom, a better friend. I think we struggle in this culture just as women and as moms, it's feeding ourselves, right? I kind of look at it like an analogy of like a watering can, and we're pouring out constantly all day to our jobs, to our spouses, to our kids,
Mhm.
and who is pouring back into us. And so many times, I think you and I have had this conversation of who's pouring back into us and what does that look like? When to tap
Yeah.
out and when to be like, okay, you know what? I need some help. that's hard for me. I don't know about you, hard to ask for help where I'm like, okay, I am not doing this well. I need a moment where I need my mom to come over and take the kids,
Mhm.
or I need a break of even just you and I have joked about walking around the block, like taking a moment. And so I think really identifying those moments of feeling overwhelmed or feeling like life feels like too much, and being able to um, ask for help or take those moments of pausing, so we can be better moms, better friends, better in the
Yeah.
workforce, all of that.
Yeah. Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
identifying it is a big thing, right? And seeing it like, oh, I'm not well. Okay, I'm short with my kids. Oh, I'm really punchy with my spouse. Okay, you know what? I did not handle that conversation well at work. What's going
Mhm.
on inside me? And identifying like, oh, something's off.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think that was the first space to me for me too. Even just navigating life now that I'm not in any traumatic experience and life is pretty smooth sailing right now is identifying it. So whether you're going through something or you're actually not going through something, you're just navigating normal everyday life, identifying what's actually happening inside of me
Right.
and what do I need to address first of all? And I think, like you said, that self care piece is huge, especially for women, and how we kind of shame ourselves or think, oh, I can't do that or that's selfish. But really, like you're saying, you can't pour from an empty pot, right?
It's
And
true.
how
Yep.
it's so important to, and I think another way to say it is have self control. Like we have to be
Right.
able to have self control to fill up our own banks, if you will, or ask for help when we won't need it, go to God and have Him fill us so we can
Yep.
continue pouring out. I love the other portion that you said. Like, once we identify what we need, like asking for help. And I
Right.
think both of us in this, and this part of why this podcast is even starting, is identifying like we can't do life alone. We weren't made
Yep.
that way. God didn't make us that way. So part
Yep.
of growing, healing, and bridging truth and reality is having people you can be real with and
Yep.
asking for help. And I think we both have utilized, our families and parents, grandparents to come help. But we've also found this community with each other. And I
Yep.
think reaching out saying, hey, I need help, or hey, I'm having a hard day. Hey, can you pray for me? Or just being there to listen and have another person to talk to, right?
Right. Right. And I
Yes.
think that's a lot of it too. I think whether you're a mom or your wife or you're an entrepreneur, I think feeling seen, right? Sometimes you and I have talked like the day to day can feel so unseen in what we do. And just being able, I think women, we have a lot of words, not to say men don't, but being able to verbally process. Sometimes you and I can just even talk and I can figure out a solution just by talking with you and not necessarily saying you gave me the answer. But I think having the ability to have a safe space, someone who doesn't judge you, right? Whether
Mhm.
that's going, to a friend, or, whether that's in prayer or whether that's on a walk, whatever that fills your need. But I think, that's so important as women that we recognize what we need in that moment and pausing,
Mhm.
and maybe realizing what is it, right? And I think sometimes that takes slowing down. And that's probably
Mhm.
really hard in the culture that we live in. Everything feels fast paced. And so taking those moments to be like, I think we use it in our house a lot. Like, sometimes things feel big, sometimes things feel small. Like on a scale of 1 to 10, let's find our 5 in the moment. Like, what is that thing that's triggering us?
Yes. Yeah. Well, and I think it's they're just even daily or simple things where if we're not understanding what's going on under the surface, those little things can give us, we can get to a 10 and we're like, oh, let's bring it
Hmm.
back down to a 5. Or what do we really need? And we can show up, and we've talked about this too. We can show up for our kids differently when we've
Right.
taken the time to care for ourselves. And so
Hmm.
really we can love other people better when we've stopped and we've taken care and we've sought counseling, we've sought help, we've have camaraderie within friendship, we've asked
Yep.
God, to fill us. Another question, I guess, kind of the bridging the truth and reality is how has counseling, life coaching, that aspect really helped bring truth of God's word and
Hmm.
circumstances together instead of having
Hmm.
them apart? How have you seen that shape you?
Ash, I have counseled for a long time. And so I think I have seen the beauty of counseling. I know it kind of gets this bad rap, or, seeing counselors or therapists, but I think what a therapist does, not to like toot their horn, but it's like it gives you an outside perspective. It's a non biased opinion. So I think for me, what it's helped me do is in those crisis or critical moments, whether it's going through something hard, right? I look at what I
Mhm.
walked through 3 years ago as something hard. Right now, I would say my day to day is pretty even keel, but she's helping me identify with some of the struggles, right? Some of the lies maybe I've believed that are
Mhm.
wrong thinking, feeling overwhelmed as a mom, feeling not qualified to walk this out. And I think she's helped me believe truths and helped me see myself differently than I do. And I think for me, I'm a huge advocate of it. And to be able to have a space that you can go to talk to someone and be able to have a safe space and recognize the things that you are struggling in that are real, right? And
Mhm.
sitting in that. And I think that's so important is the pain I experienced 3 years ago isn't the first time I experienced pain, and to sit in it and to be okay with it. And you and I have talked about that. I think we sometimes live in a culture where we shove it, right? And we
Mhm.
press it down, whether it's something hard or something little, and it can come out sideways. Even in parenting, you can shove down certain moments of things that feels like a struggle, and then it comes out sideways, and you're like, is this really this, or is it something else? So I'm grateful that I've allowed a place to allow counsel and to allow someone to speak into my life and be able to have a safe space to talk to her about whether that is what I'm feeling. And I think it can vary week to week, but I've seen a lot of growth tremendously in myself, just of areas that I've allowed myself more grace in. I think we're
Yeah.
hardest on ourselves as women, right?
Yeah.
And she even said that to me the other day, like, can you just admit and just look at how far you've come? And I think
Mhm.
that's hard to say. And we don't necessarily see it in our day to day. And I think if you look at the progress and everything that you've walked through, ask yourself, like, it's hard for us as women to be like, yep, you know what? I'm doing a good job. I need to be kind
Mhm.
to myself. I need to be
Yep.
loving to myself. Even when I look in the mirror, you and I have talked about that. I'm kind of digressing, but all that to say, I think I'm grateful for the space that therapists or counselors or a mentor or spiritual mentor that people hold in your life. And I think it's important, especially in the society we're living in.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you. There's been some, like bad views, or like people think that if I go to a life coach or a counselor, that means there's something wrong with me, or I don't understand what I'm doing, or I can't process emotion, or only you should do that if you go through trauma or trial. And that's just not it. I think there's so much truth to being real about where you're at, whether you're in a good place, a tricky place, or an in between place, right?
Right.
And there's so much wisdom, like you're saying, from an outside source. Like, I don't know about you, but I get sometimes clouded, or I have blinders up to whatever I'm going through in my own perspective. And I feel like meeting with a counselor, pastoral counselor, life
Mhm.
coach type thing, they kind of open your perspective to see, well, what about this? And how about this? And I think I've also found that I'm believing a lot of lies about
Right.
myself or about God or about others that I didn't realize I was believing. I mean, when I first started counseling, I didn't understand that I actually was living in codependent patterns. I didn't know what codependency was. And
Right.
so it's kind of like you don't know what you don't know. And I think there's like a wealth of knowledge out there, in wisdom and truth that comes from people, who are experienced in helping
Mhm.
us lean on God and discover what He wants us to learn, right?
Right.
Uh, which has been huge and a big part of it. So I just want to encourage anybody who's listening. I guess Melissa and I have had different journeys, but similar avenues where we have sought healing and help and support. And so we just like to encourage you, if you are in a season where you don't know what's next, or you're in a season of trial and trauma, or you're even in a good, healthy, I'm liking life season, that it's important to be in community, right?
I
It's
agree. Yep.
important to have friends and support and to be honest and real with people. It's important to seek help and to seek
Yep.
guidance in whatever way, shape, or form that comes with mentoring or life coaching or counseling. Um, and it's important to be honest and real with ourselves, like we talked about in the beginning. Identify what's happening, go to God, ask God what's happening, and asking Him the avenue He wants us to take. Maybe the first thing is, sitting down with God. Maybe the first thing is going to counseling.Maybe the first thing is, getting involved in a church or a women's group or a running group or a
Right.
work group to get that support. We just would like to encourage you in that. And we're hoping that this podcast is a step towards reality and truth and support that you need in your life.
Yep. No, I couldn't agree more. And I think too, one thing that you touched on is like, I think sometimes what counseling has done, and not to beat this over the hammer, but I think sometimes we believe the lies of who we are as women, right? And I think
Yeah.
in counseling 3 years ago looks different than counseling now for me, is sometimes I believe the lies of I had to identify as a widow, or I had to identify as a single mom. And I think she helped me so much of figuring out who my identity was and is.
Mhm.
And I think that shaped who I am now going forward as a mom, as a single mom, doing it well. And I think sometimes in life we can take on these labels and take on
Yeah.
these things that we shouldn't necessarily identify with, good or bad, and we just do. And
Yeah.
really realizing who our identity is in. And so I'm grateful for that, that she's really reshaped my thinking. I do think, yeah, like you and I said, it sometimes gets stigma of bad, bad vibes about, coaching life, life coach or a therapist. And I think it's such a great thing to have a safe space to be able to talk to people and share your heart and be vulnerable and be real with, and in a non-biased opinion. So
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love that you touched on identity. We will actually be talking about that next in our next podcast. So thanks for bringing that up. And thanks for joining us today. Check us out on social media at Peace Runs Deep. Find us online at www.peacerunsdeep.com. We have tons of information and blogs and things there for you. We're happy you joined us. Remember, Peace Runs Deep. See you next time.